If you make any of these mistakes for fantasy football 2025, you've already lost your leagues. I'm telling you, a majority of fantasy players that do these things end up losing their leagues. So in this video, I'm going to give you the top 10 mistakes to avoid for fantasy football. A very important, very, very important video if you actually want to win your leagues, okay? If you're new to the channel, this is what I do best. I help people win their leagues. Subscribe, thumbs up, turn on the bell. And if you actually want all of the optimal players drafted each round, avoiding all of the guys that are going to bust and everything on a silver platter, I'm going to give you guys the actual hack on how to win fantasy football. I'll grab the 16-round draft solution. I've linked it below. Use code WIN to save. This is the absolute game changer. I'm telling you, once you see these mistakes, you'll understand and experience 16 rounds, you'll really never look back. All right, so let's dive into it, okay? Hit the thumbs up, drop a comment below. What's a mistake that you feel, I want to make this interactive. What's a mistake you feel that you should avoid? What do you think is a top mistake? I'd love to get you guys feedback in the comments below. All right, so the first mistake, you gotta avoid this. Don't do this. And that's trusting the consensus rankings. Let me give you an example. Let's have a discussion here. Let's make this fun and interactive, okay? Now, if I believed the consensus last year, I would have drafted Christian Kirk ahead of Brian Thomas Jr. because, hey, he was ahead of him in his rankings, right? And there's so much pressure when you're in the draft and you see a player, there's a player you really want. Let's say last year, I'm gonna go back to last year. I really wanted Brian Thomas, for example. But there I am at my ADP, whatever round I'm in, round 6. And if I get Brian Thomas Jr. round 6, I look ridiculous, but Christian Kirk is there, right? But the way I design 16 rounds is I just completely fade out Kirk and I tell you where to draft Brian Thomas Jr. And this is just an example. This is going back to 2024, right? And this happens every single year. Again, back in 2024, I'm going to use that example. Now we're in 2025, but I want to talk about, again, last year, Deebo Samuel and Ayuk, both coming off round 3. I'm like, we don't even know who the one is. Like, nobody knew who the one was going into last year at the wide receiver position for the 49ers, and yet they were both coming off in the 3rd round. Or how about Keenan Allen round 4 to 5? Simply because he was coming off a year with Herbert the year before where he was force-fed. Now he was on a new team and he was being drafted high. So, oh yeah, CMC first overall as well, simply copied and pasted from last year. Trusting the rankings will make you lose your leagues. And this is why I win. This is why I get the advantage, because I'm simply able to process the depth charts and the talent and look at it and say, hey, that guy is ranked way too high. He's on a regression year. I'm not going to draft him. I'm not going with the rankings. Yet every magazine, every website, every podcast does rankings based on last year, which again, why would you watch anybody else? That's why you got to subscribe here, because no one else is giving the truth. So everything you're getting here is authentic and genuine. That's what I pride my brand on. Okay. So trusting the consensus rankings is the worst thing you could do. But on the plus side, I use the rankings as an actual kind of guideline of what not to do, right? And kind of pick and choose who I want to draft. So it's very helpful in a thing of what not to do, but don't draft on them, okay? Tip number 2, something you got to avoid to win your leagues, and something to avoid so you don't lose your league. You don't want to lose your league by doing this, and that's drafting wide receiver rounds 1 and round 2. I'll tell you why. There's many reasons why I don't go wide receiver. That being said, for 2025 fantasy football and this year, there is a lot of depth at running back. There's a ton of running backs that you can get that can be RB1s and finish top 5, top 10, and guys like Caleb Johnson, RJ Harvey, and others. So that being said, you're saying, well, Joe, why do I got to go running back early still if, there's other running backs later? There's a ton of depth at wide receiver, a ton of depth. I'm going to go back a couple years to give you a quick example. Let's go back to last year. Last year, I ended up going Saquon end of round 1 because I'm always drafting at the end of round 1 last year. I went Saquon and then went Henry. And then later in my drafts, I was able to secure Ladd McConkey and Brian Thomas Jr. How'd you know, Joe? Those guys, by the way, are coming off round 1 and 2. Brian Thomas round 1 this year, Ladd McConkey round 2. We were getting them around 7 to 9 last year. And they weren't my only wide receivers, but I felt really confident that they were going to succeed. And I loaded up on running backs early. So that being said, I still think you can get an ace wide receiver and a running back at 1 and 2 this year. Because I think if you get, let's say, Chase, and let's say you go Bucky or like Kyron round 2 or something like that, or whoever you want, I still think there's a ton of depth at wide receiver. There's a ton of depth at running back, but I'm okay not going running back this year simply because I know that I'm going to get a ton of running backs that I love in mid to late rounds. So, but I still will not go wide receiver simply because there's still more depth later at the wide receiver position. And there's a ton of wide receivers coming out of this draft that I still think have a good chance to be the ones on their team. And I'm telling you, man, you can stack a bunch of them later and you're going to be rock solid. I explain exactly who they are in the 16-round draft. So you should grab it below, use code WIN to save. Okay, tip number 3 on a mistake, taking aging stars too early or at all. Now, I tend to avoid older players completely. Going into this year, Aaron Jones in Minnesota, yes, he's slated as the RB1, but I don't really care for him. Derrick Henry, I was the guy telling you to draft this guy when people telling you to draft Damian Williams ahead of him a couple of years ago, 3, 4 years, 5 years ago, right? Then he had his breakout year. Now everybody's riding the Henry train. But eventually, a couple reasons why you don't want to draft them is eventually they're just going to have their fall off year. You don't want to be there to catch the broken pieces. You just don't want to be there, right? You ride these guys for so long, and then it's time to say goodbye, see you later. It was a fun ride. Check you later, right? And you're looking for more young, hungry, up-and-coming players, but they got to be in the right depth chart. So you can't just fade older players and just draft any young rookie wide receiver or running back or quarterback or whatever. But you definitely want to make sure, this is very, very important, that you don't want to fall into a fall-off year and you don't want to ride these old players too long. Because you catch them on their down cliff, then they're done. But a lot of these guys show signs, like DeAndre Hopkins has been declining for years. Keenan Allen showing signs of regression now, right? You kind of read between the lines and kind of see things, right? So, and again, in 16 rounds, I explain all this, but you just don't want to overpay. Like Henry this year, love him, love the talent, love the offense, but I just like other running backs. I like other running backs that are younger and I just feel are just going to get more volume and are not going to fall off the cliff this year, okay? I still like Henry. But personally, I'm just looking at youth. That's what I'm doing, right? So taking aging stars, and definitely don't draft them too early. Like you don't want to get a super old guy, like last year, I got to go to example, Keenan Allen around 4 to 5. Okay, no, there was better players to get, all right? All right, number 4. This is very, very important, and I cannot emphasize this enough, and I'm a real advocate of rookies, and sometimes they get burned on a couple of them. Last year, Keon Coleman got burned. I thought he was slated to be the wide receiver 1, and they just never got fed as much as he could, got injured a few times. Mind you, he wasn't my only wide receiver. I had Ladd McConkey, Brian Thomas Jr. and others, but he was a guy that I stashed a little bit later, and he just didn't do well. But don't let one bad experience ruin other amazing experiences, because there's a ton of good rookies coming in this year. There's a ton of great rookies that came in last year and did really, really well. Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., Ladd McConkey, just to name a few. So I am really, really high on the rookies, but you got to make sure they're the right rookies, right? You got to make sure they're high on the depth chart. They're going to be slated for a ton of volume. And who are they on the depth chart with? Are they going to supersede the person ahead of them? Is the person an aging star, right? Or a fading star, twilight, whatever? Are they fading? And is this guy going to emerge? And how much volume is he going to get? And how good was he in college? What was his draft capital? Did they draft him in the first round? Because if they drafted him in the first round, it's very likely that he's going to see the field a lot. So just don't ignore rookie breakouts, because especially this year, I'm loading up on a ton of guys that are in a great position to succeed, okay? So ignoring rookie breakouts is a big no-no. Do not underestimate them. And I see this all the time. People will just draft a name. Like, again, I'm going to go back to the example, Christian Kirk. I know the name. His ADP is higher. I'm going to draft him. No, look at Brian Thomas Jr., man. Like, look where he was drafted. Look at his talent. Go watch the video, right? Like, you got to see this stuff. So don't ignore amazing potential rookies. Just make sure they're the right ones, okay? Drafting based on last year's set. This is like the killer, the destroyer of fantasy football leagues, okay? It's just, and everybody gives advice predicate on this number 5 thing, drafting based on last year. This is going back to the rankings, right? It happens every year. They tell you, these are the guys that finish on top, draft them again in that order. And it's relentless, it's ruthless. And I'll tell you why the mainstream and everybody, not even mainstream, every podcaster does this except for me. I'll tell you why they do it, right? Because they don't want to look foolish. They think that they look smart, right? And here's how they do it. This is very deceptive, right? They tell you, like, let's go example. Let's use CMC. Last year, everybody told you CMC first of all because he finished on top the year before. Right? And I was telling you, regression's happening. He just got married, Super Bowl hangover, age 30, whatever, right? 2 pinnacle years, probability is very low he's going to do it again. Things change. Law of averages that he's eventually, if he crosses the street 100 times, a car is going to hit you, right? If you're in a ton of traffic, if you keep crossing, like everybody eventually falls off, right? So let's go back to it. They told you CMC first overall. Everyone drafted CMC first overall. And it was like a consensus. Everybody on their podcast, CMC first overall. Why do they do this? Let's get to it, right? It's because they try to save face. They're like, okay, if I tell them that this guy's first overall and all the other guys in the same order, pretty much with a couple of variances, right? They switch a couple players in to make it like a little interesting, right? It's all BS. So one of some of their golden boys. So anyway, they do this because they want to play it safe. They're like, we're going to play it safe. We're not going to look bad. And here's the deception, right? The year after, they're not held accountable. They're not like, oh yeah, we messed up on CMC. We were just copying. They don't come out and admit like, hey, I was wrong. Like I'm copying and pasting every year. This is like an untold deception lie we do every single year. They do this to screw you, and they laugh at you every year thinking you don't know it. Like, it's ludicrous, man. They just lie to you with the copy and paste, and they're never held accountable or talk about it or apologize for it. It's ludicrous, guys. Don't listen to the sheep. Don't listen to rankings. Don't draft based on last year's stats. No, it's a fresh year. Now, that being said, you should still consider last year's stats. Hey, they did really well. Where am I drafting him? Is there another rookie emerging I can get for value that I don't have to spend a second round pick on Ladd McConkey this year? Maybe I'll look at a Trey Harris. Maybe I get him for the 9th and I could fade Ladd McConkey this year, right? But who am I going to, can I get a better option in round 2 than a Ladd McConkey and compensate? Like, I look at all of the variances and the variables, and I just don't draft based on last year's stats, but I use them as a guideline, okay? All right, overpaying for committee backs. This is a huge mistake. And again, nobody's teaching this stuff. Nobody's teaching this stuff. And I'll give you a quick example here, right? And there's a ton of examples. In fact, I should actually pull up a chart here and pull it up here at the current stats of this year. But what happens is people based on ADP, like I'm talking about, will draft an RB2 on their team instead of going for a rookie who could be an RB1. Stick with me here. I'll give you a quick example for this year, okay? Let's go through this. Now, here's a perfect example. David Montgomery is RB21. I'm going to go full PPR here, okay? So David Montgomery is RB20. He is sitting ahead of all of the rookie running backs. He's sitting ahead of Hampton, Harvey, Judkins. He's sitting ahead of Caleb Johnson. And TreVeyon Henderson. He is sitting ahead of all of those guys. And he is the RB2. Well, Joe, he performs. Shut up. No. You aim high on the depth chart. And I can keep going, man. There's even guys that we know are just not going to be that good. Najee Harris. Right? Like, he is going into the season, at the time of this recording, he's going into the season as the RB1 according to what the coach says, which we're going to get to that in a second with the coaching. But it's like, yeah, like I know he's going to be in a committee. So look to get running backs that are on top of their depth charts that are potentially going to be the one over knowing guaranteed that that's going to be the 2. Does that make sense? Or a guy that's plagued with injuries or is going to absolutely suck. Do you understand what I'm saying? Aim high in the depth chart. All right, this is a simple one. I just don't want to overlook it. Ignoring schedules and bye weeks. I don't really put a lot of weight on this. Obviously, schedules is important to some degree, but if you have a good offense where you know the guy, I look at more at depth charts and how much the volume that player is going to get over actually like who they're playing. Obviously, who they're playing is going to play a factor based on that week, but overall, this is a little more relevant for like daily fantasy, I would say, but bye weeks as well. You also don't want 10 players that have the same bye week, right? You want to kind of be aware of it in the back of your mind. Like, for example, like if you, like I always say, if you have one quarterback, get a backup quarterback. In a super flex league, if you have 2 quarterbacks or whatever, always get the 3rd quarterback, right? Now, you don't want your backup quarterback to have the same bye week as your starting quarterback if that's your backup, because the main purpose of a backup is to cover injury, lack of performance, and bye weeks, right? So you got to just be a little bit aware, right? Or if your 2 starting running backs happen to have the same bye week, kind of sucks. But that's where I have like depth. I have like a lot of running backs where this isn't really an issue, right? Like I have like I usually stack like 6 or 7 running backs on my team, and at least 5 minimum. And usually I'm able to rotate properly where bye weeks aren't an issue. So they're not really an issue for me. I rarely run into this. The main place you're going to run into it is mainly with quarterbacks. You just got to be careful with tight ends as well and stuff like that, right? And also defense. Sometimes if people want 2 defenses, right, just make sure everything lines up perfectly, okay? So just be aware of it, but it's not don't go crazy, okay? And this is number 8. This is huge. We're talking about fantasy football analysts lying to you and not giving you the truth, but falling for camp hype and coaches' comments. I put lies. Listen, a coach will pump up their players regardless, even if they suck. Like it's just nobody tells you this. Again, it's not like nobody talks about it. Everybody wants to be like so proper. Like, even if a player doesn't like another teammate, you ask them what their player, what do you think of your teammate? Oh yeah, man, that guy's a great guy. That guy's solid, man. Like he did, ooh, yeah. Like, and then behind the scenes, like, dude, I hate that guy. I can't stand that guy. Like we live in like a facade. It's a fake. It's like smoke and mirrors, right? So a coach will tell you like, this guy, like for example, this year, Chargers, like they brought in Najee, then they drafted Hampton first overall. Like don't listen to what they say. Look at what they do, right? If they love Najee and he's their one, right? Why would you draft Hampton? Like this, let's think of it from a logical perspective because common sense ain't that common, right? So if I'm looking at it, I'm like, hey man, like we got Najee. Yeah, that's our one. Let's just draft the best possible running back round 1. When we just brought in Najee, who they want to be, that's BS. And that's just one example. Maybe Najee becomes the one. Maybe Najee gets so angry and motivated and he becomes the one and he tears it up. But I'm just giving you an example, right? And there's a ton of examples where coaches hype up players and the player never ends up seeing the field or just doesn't do anything. It's just, it's crazy, man. All I'm saying is just don't always believe what they're saying. Like I was just hearing that Sean Payton was talking about a tight end, Caleb something. I think he was a 7th round pick or something like that this year. And he's like, yeah, I love this guy. He's amazing. He was a former basketball player and all that. It's like, dude, like you're hyping him up. Let's chill. Like he was like a 7th rounder, undrafted free agent tight end, like chill. Maybe he ends up being good, but it's like coaches get excited for stuff that just probably isn't going to go anywhere. Okay. And another thing I want to talk about, one year I remember I fell for this. I was a victim of this. It was Amir Abdullah. He was playing for the Lions. He came out in a preseason game and he looked great in this preseason game. Amir Abdullah, this is going back, I don't know, 2013, 2012, 14. Look up Amir Abdullah's rookie year. So I'm watching this. He does this little shake wiggle move and I'm like, Amir Abdullah looks good. I ended up drafting him. I don't know what I spent on him. It was like a 6th, 7th round pick, something like that. And he ended up, look up Amir Abdullah. He sucks, right? So he looked good in preseason, but it was like, oh man, it was like, it wasn't what I thought, right? So lower expectations with that hype. We got 2 more important ones. Again, if you're new to the channel, smash your tap and slap, hit the thumbs up. Let me know what you guys are thinking. This one's very important. I want to spend too much time on it. I always wait on tight ends, simple rule tight ends, as long as they get 10 points out of them. And last year, Laporta was coming off round 2. I'm like, dude, we were getting him in the 60 round draft, which I was recommending him as the main tight end 2 years ago. We got him in like the 10th, 11th round. Then everybody, the sheep jumped on him, remember the copy and paste based on last year's ranking. And Laporta was coming off round 2 last year. And I'm like, a little expensive, right? A little expensive. We liked him last year when we got him for value. So I am completely fading Laporta. This was last year. I was fading Laporta round 2 for the most part. And it's like, I can just wait on tight end. And there's a ton of value at tight ends. I explain all this in the 16 round draft solution, who the tight ends to get, stack them, double up. And as long as you get 10 points out of your tight end, you're good. You want to focus on the skilled positions, the scarce positions, aka your team with an ace quarterback. And this is not a strategy video. This is what not to do, but I'm giving you actual strategy. But drafting a tight end too early is an absolute no. Don't do it. You can wait. Okay. And the last one here, your biggest mistake, and you want to avoid doing it, is not using 16 rounds. Rankings don't help. And I kind of explained in this video. Once you try 16 rounds, experience it, watch how I do the mock drafts, look at how I perform, and you guys will be light years at everybody. You'll see things before your league mates and they'll have no chance. It's that simple. Okay. So those are your 10 things to avoid for fantasy football. If you actually want to win your leagues, don't do these things. Let me know what you guys think. I talked a lot, but I was excited and passionate and I want you guys to win. Guys, I'm telling you, man, subscribe, thumbs up. We're going to keep the content rolling for you, but I had to get this video out and you can come back to this and make notes if you haven't. And let's win our leagues this year. Don't do these things. We'll talk soon, guys. Have yourself a great day.